I was holding the phone so tight my knuckles turned white, standing in the middle of my kitchen where the morning sun usually brought me peace. But there was no peace today. I can still hear Lena's voice, casual and breezy, as if she were discussing the price of tomatoes or the weather, delivering the sentence that ended my life as I knew it. "Oh, Renata, didn't Max tell you? We already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." The line went dead, but those words hung in the air of my silent house like toxic smoke, choking the breath right out of me. Special people. I looked down at the pale pink chiffon dress hanging on the pantry door. I had spent 2 weeks' wages on that dress, careful not to dip into the emergency fund I kept for them. I had pressed it so carefully, terrified of scorching the delicate fabric, dreaming of the moment I would watch my only son Max say "I do." It swung there now in the draft from the air conditioner, useless, a ghost of a memory that would never happen. I wasn't special. I was just the woman who had paid their $500 rent every first of the month for 3 years without missing a single payment. I was the woman who bought their sectional sofa, the gray velvet one with the chaise lounge, because Lena said her back hurt on their old futon. I was the woman who filled their refrigerator with organic groceries, expensive cuts of meat, and imported cheeses when they were a little short, and who had paid for that very wedding dress I wasn't allowed to see. I stood in the living room of the house I had mortgaged to help them start their business, a business that never seemed to make a profit, realizing with a sickening jolt that I was nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I simply walked over to the wall calendar where I had circled wedding in hopeful red ink, a question mark because they hadn't given me a date yet, and I took it down. My hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. Then I walked to the dining room table, the same oak table where I had fed Max his oatmeal before school, where I had helped him with his algebra homework until midnight, and where I had written check after check to support a grown man who couldn't find a seat for me at his wedding. Picked up my checkbook. The leather cover was worn from use. If I wasn't special enough to witness their joy, surely I wasn't special enough to pay their bills. That morning the tears didn't come, but the silence did. And in that silence the old, accommodating Renata died, and someone entirely new began to wake up. Looking back now, it's a strange thing when the blindfold finally rips off. It hurts sharply like a band-aid being pulled from hairy skin, but then the clarity hits you. I sat there for a long time just listening to the hum of the refrigerator, my refrigerator in my house, the only place where I was apparently welcome. I started to think back, retracing the steps of how I got here. We mothers are experts at revisionist history, aren't we? We like to paint over the cracks in our children's character with the gold paint of our love. I had told myself that Max was just stressed, that Lena was just particular, that the economy was hard for young people. But looking at that hanging pink dress, the excuses evaporated. I remembered the time just last Christmas when I canceled my dental appointment, a root canal I desperately needed, to pay for Lena's car repair because she couldn't get to work without it. I lived on soup for 2 weeks because chewing hurt so much. And then the very next day, I saw on Facebook that she'd taken the day off to go to a luxury spa with her sisters. I remembered the caption. Self-care day. Deserved it. I remembered feeling a twinge then, a small prick of hurt, but I shoved it down. She works hard, I told myself. She needs to relax. I remembered eating rice and beans for a week so I could give them a little extra. For their anniversary dinner 2 years ago. A dinner I was never invited to join, of course. It wasn't just about money. It was about the currency of respect. And I was bankrupt. The phone rang again about 10 minutes later. It was Max. Normally my heart would leap. I'd rush to answer, wiping my hands on my apron, hoping for a scrap of connection. Hi Mom, how are you? This time I watched the screen light up, Max calling. And I felt nothing. Just a cold, hard stone in the center of my chest. I let it ring. Once, twice, 4 times. It went to voicemail. Then Lena called. I let it ring. Then the text started coming in, a barrage of digital demands. Mom, pick up. Renata, are you there? We need to talk about the rent. The landlord is asking. Did you forget the transfer? It's the first. The rent. Of course. It was the first of the month. The timing of their exclusion was almost impressive in its stupidity. They had insulted the hand that fed them exactly 24 hours before feeding time. They thought I was so desperate for their love that I would swallow the humiliation of the wedding, just to keep the privilege of paying their landlord. I turned my phone off. Completely off. I watched the screen go black. I placed it in a junk drawer in the kitchen, under a stack of old takeout menus. Then I went to the bedroom and changed out of my housecoat. I put on my good slacks, the navy ones that fit well, a crisp white blouse and my comfortable walking shoes. I looked in the mirror. My eyes looked tired, rimmed with red, but my jaw was set. I wasn't going for a walk though. I was going to war.my first stop was the bank. Mr. Klein has been the manager at our local branch for 20 years. He knows my history. He knows about my late husband, Robert, and how hard Robert worked at the factory to leave me with a nest egg so I wouldn't have to worry in my golden years. Robert used to say, "Renata, this money is for you. For your peace. Not for fancy cars but for your peace." Mr. Klein also knew intimately how fast that nest egg was cracking. When I walked into his office, the air conditioning hit my face, cooling the flush of anger on my cheeks. He looked up from his desk with a smile that faltered instantly when he saw my expression. "Mrs. Richter," he said, standing up immediately. "Is everything all right? You look different." "I am different, Mr. Klein," I said, my voice steady, surprising even myself. I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. "I need to cancel all automatic transfers. Today. Right now. The rent transfer to Max's landlord, the car insurance payment for Lena, the monthly stipend to their joint account. All of it." Mr. Klein blinked, his mouth opening slightly. He looked at his computer screen, then back at me. "All of it? Mrs. Richter, those have been set up for years. The rent transfer is scheduled to go out at noon today. Is this temporary?" "No," I said. "It is permanent." "And Mr. Klein? I want to change my account numbers. I want to ensure that no one, absolutely no one, who might have had access to my old checks or routing numbers can touch a cent of my money. I want full security. Two-factor authentication, passwords only I know the works. I want my money to be Fort Knox." He looked at me for a long moment. I saw him glancing at the photo of his own children on his desk, and then a look of genuine relief washed over his face. He didn't ask for details. He didn't pry. He just nodded, a professional ally. "I think that is a very wise decision, Mrs. Richter. Let's get started." As we went through the paperwork, seeing the amounts on the screen made me nauseous. 500 here. 200 there. 800 for emergencies that were never explained. It bled out of my account like a slow hemorrhage. Mr. Klein printed out a summary of the last 3 years for my records. I stared at the total at the bottom of the page. The number seemed to vibrate on the paper. $33,400. I felt the breath leave my lungs. $33,000. That was the trip to Italy Robert and I had always talked about but never took because we were saving. That was the kitchen renovation I put off because Max needed a new laptop. That was a new roof. That was my security. That was my husband's sweat and sacrifice, his aching back and long shifts, handed over to 2 people who thought I wasn't special enough to share a glass of champagne with. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and stinging. Not of sadness but of sheer, boiling anger at my own foolishness. "Mrs. Richter," Mr. Klein said softly, pushing a box of tissues toward me. "You are doing the right thing. It is not selfish to protect your future." "I know," I whispered, dabbing at my eyes. "But it shouldn't feel this heavy to save yourself, should it?" Leaving the bank, I felt lighter, terrifyingly lighter. The tether was cut. I walked to the park nearby, the one with the big oak trees where I used to push Max on the swings when he was a toddler. I sat on a bench and watched a young mother wiping ice cream off her toddler's face. The boy was laughing, looking at her like she was the center of the universe, like she was the sun and the moon combined. Max used to look at me like that. I remembered his sticky little hands on my cheeks, his voice saying, "You're the best mommy." When did that change? When did I become an ATM? When did mommy turn into mom I need? Was it when his father died? Was it when he met Lena? Or was it my fault? Had I given too much, taught him that my love was a commodity to be harvested rather than a garden to be watered? I stayed there until the sun began to dip low, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. I wasn't ready to go home. Home meant turning the phone back on. Home meant facing the reality of what I had done. But I couldn't hide forever. I drove back, and as I turned onto my street, my stomach dropped. There were 3 cars in my driveway. Max's sedan, Lena's hatchback, and a sleek dark car I didn't recognize. I could see lights on in my living room. Shadows moved across the curtains. They were inside. Of course they were inside. I had given them a spare key for emergencies 5 years ago. Apparently, an unpaid rent check constituted an emergency worthy of an invasion. I parked on the street, taking a deep breath. My hands gripped the steering wheel. This was it. The confrontation. I could drive away. I could go to a hotel. But no. This was my house. Robert had bought this house for us. I would not be chased out of my own sanctuary. I walked up the path, the sound of my heels clicking on the pavement echoing in the evening air. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face remained calm. I opened the front door. The sound of voices stopped abruptly. The scene before me was like a tableau of betrayal. Max was sitting on my sofa, head in his hands, wearing his work clothes. Lena was pacing the rug, my Persian rug that I loved, talking on her cell phone. And a man in a gray suit was sitting at my dining table, sifting through a stack of papers. My papers. My personal mail. My bank statements. What is happening here? My voice came out louder than I expected, booming in the entryway. They all jumped. Lena spun around, snapping her phone shut. Her eyes went wide. Renata. Thank God. Where have you been? Your phone is off. We've been worried sick. Worried? I asked, stepping into the room but leaving the front door wide open behind me. Worried about me? Or worried about the transfer that didn't arrive at noon? Max stood up, his face flushed red. Mom, don't start. We went to the bank. They said you canceled everything. Mr. Klein wouldn't tell us why. He treated us like criminals. We couldn't believe it. Imagine that, I said dryly, placing my purse on the console table. And who is this? I pointed a shaking finger to the man at my table. The man stood up, smoothing his tie. He had a smile that was all teeth and didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Richter, I am Mr. Fisher. I'm a family attorney. Your children called me because they are deeply concerned about your sudden change in behavior. They believe you might be undergoing a crisis. A crisis? I laughed. It was a harsh barking sound that surprised us all. A crisis? No, Mr. Fisher. I am having a moment of absolute clarity. And you? I looked at the pile of papers under his hand. Are violating my privacy. Get your hands off my documents. Mom, stop it. Max snapped, stepping toward me. The little boy I loved was gone. This was a stranger with desperate eyes. We're trying to help you. You disappear all day, you cut us off financially without a word, you're acting erratic. We have bills, Mom. We have obligations. You can't just pull the rug out from under us. Obligations. I looked him dead in the eye. Did you have an obligation to invite your mother to your wedding? Or was that optional? The room went deadly silent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Lena gasped. Max looked at his shoes. Oh, Lena stammered, her voice switching instantly to that sugary, manipulative tone I had heard 1,000 times. She walked toward me, arms outstretched. Renata, honey, is that what this is about? The wedding? It was just a misunderstanding. We didn't want to bother you. It was so last minute, and we know you don't like crowds and… Stop, I said, holding up a hand. Just stop. We only invited special people. That's what you said, Lena. Yesterday. On the phone. Do not insult my intelligence by rewriting history 24 hours later. Mr. Fisher cleared his throat, sensing his paymaster was losing ground. Mrs. Richter, regardless of personal disputes, there is the matter of your well-being. Sudden irrational financial decisions can be a symptom of cognitive decline. Your children are worried that you aren't capable of managing your affairs right now. My blood ran cold. I looked at Max. He wouldn't meet my eyes. They weren't just here to bully me into paying. They were threatening me. They were implying I was senile because I stopped writing checks. They were prepared to steal my agency to keep their comfort. Cognitive decline? I repeated, stepping closer to the lawyer until I could smell his expensive cologne. Because I decided to keep my own money? Is it sane to give $33,000 to people who hide their marriage from you? Or is it sane to finally stop? We just want a power of attorney, Lena said, stepping forward again, trying to take my hand. I pulled back as if she were fire. Just temporarily, Renata. Until you feel better. We can manage the bills, make sure everything is paid. We're family. We love you. Family? I spat the word out like a curse. Get out. All of you. Get out of my house. We're not leaving until we resolve this, Max said, crossing his arms. He looked so much like his father in that moment, but without a shred of Robert's integrity. Mom, the landlord is going to evict us if we don't pay by Friday. You co-signed the lease. It affects you too. I'll call the landlord myself tomorrow and remove my name, I said. I'm sure once I explain the situation, he will be understanding. Now get out or I am calling the police. You wouldn't, Max sneered. Call the cops on your own son? Try me, I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and turned it on. The screen lit up. I held my thumb over the keypad. I will report a break-in. Because that is what this is. You are not guests. You are intruders. Mr. Fisher, realizing this was not going to be the easy intimidation session he had promised them, began packing his briefcase. Mr. and Mrs. Richter, I think we should leave. We can discuss legal options later. Legal options? I asked. Here is my legal option. If you ever enter my home without my invitation again, I will press charges. And Max? Give me my key. Now. Max looked at Lena. She nodded slightly, her eyes narrowed into slits of pure venom. He reached into his pocket and slammed the key onto the side table. It made a sharp clack against the wood. Fine. Be like that. Die alone, Mom. See if we care. The words hit me like a physical blow to the stomach. I felt the air leave me. Die alone. The ultimate fear of every parent. But I didn't flinch. I stood tall. I was already alone, Max. I just didn't know it. Now get out. They filed out, the three of them, leaving a silence that felt heavy and bruised. I locked the door behind them. Then I slid the deadbolt. Then I dragged a heavy dining chair and wedged it under the doorknob. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and my hand shook so badly I spilled half of it on the counter. I sat on the floor of my kitchen, pulling my knees to my chest, and I cried. I cried for the little boy with the scraped knees who used to run to me for comfort. I cried for the young man I had been so proud of at his graduation. I cried for the foolish, blind woman I had been. But as the moon rose outside the window, casting a silver light over my empty house, the tears stopped. I washed my face with cold water. I made myself a piece of toast with apricot jam. And I realized that for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worrying about whether they had eaten. I only had to worry about me. The next morning I didn't wait. I called a locksmith at 8 a.m. I need all the locks changed, I told him. And I want deadbolts on every door. The heavy-duty kind. While the locksmith, a nice young man named Ethan with a kind smile, was working, I went into the garden. My garden used to be my pride and joy. Roses, hydrangeas, peonies, but I had neglected it lately. Fertilizer costs money. New bulbs cost money. My time had been consumed with their dramas, their crises. I pulled weeds with a vengeance. Every dandelion I yanked from the earth felt like pulling out a lie I had been told. Mrs. Richter? I looked up. My neighbor, Eleanor, was standing at the fence. We had lived next to each other for 10 years, but we rarely spoke beyond a wave. I was always too busy rushing to solve Max's problems to be a good neighbor. Hello, Eleanor, I said, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my glove. I don't mean to pry, she said, leaning over the white picket fence. But I saw the police car drive by last night, checking the neighborhood, and then I saw your son leaving in quite a huff. And now the locksmith. Is everything okay? I looked at this woman. She had kind eyes and deep lines around her mouth that suggested she laughed often. I decided in that moment to tell the truth. No more hiding. No more protecting Max's reputation. Secrets only grow in the dark. No, Eleanor, everything is not okay, I said, standing up and brushing the dirt from my knees. My son and his wife tried to bully me into giving them control of my finances because I stopped paying their rent. They think I'm incompetent because I finally grew a spine. Eleanor's eyes widened, and then she let out a long breath, shaking her head. Oh, honey, Join the club. The club. My children think I'm a bank club, she said with a wry smile. My daughter tried the same thing 5 years ago. Nearly broke me. Come over for tea. I have a lemon cake that is much better than dwelling on it. That afternoon, sitting in Eleanor's sunny kitchen, surrounded by her collection of ceramic cats and the smell of baking, I learned I wasn't alone. She told me her story, how her daughter had threatened to keep the grandkids away if Eleanor didn't pay for a remodel. She told me how she had to stand firm, how hard it was, and how she eventually found peace. They count on our guilt, Eleanor said, pouring me a second cup of Earl Grey. They weaponize our maternal instinct. They know we would die for them, so they assume we should pay for them too. But Renata, money isn't love. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is cut the cord. They threatened to declare me incompetent. I confessed, my voice trembling. They brought a lawyer. They said I was having a crisis. Eleanor reached across the table and patted my hand. Let them try. You are sharp as a tack. But you need to protect yourself. Document everything. Every text, every call, every time they show up. And get your own lawyer. A shark. Not a family friend. Taking Eleanor's advice, I hired Mr. Weber the next day. He was an older man, serious and sharp, who specialized in elder law. When I told him the story, he didn't look shocked. He looked determined. We will prepare a preemptive defense, Mr. Weber said. We will get you a full medical evaluation from an independent doctor to prove your competency. We will secure your assets. And we will send a cease and desist letter to Mr. Fisher regarding the harassment. I felt a surge of power. I wasn't a victim. I was a client. I was taking charge. But the peace didn't last long. Max and Lena weren't going to give up their cash cow without a fight. 3 days later, on a Tuesday, the doorbell rang. I checked the new camera system I had installed. Another investment in myself. It was a woman I didn't know holding a clipboard. I opened the door with the chain on. Yes. Mrs. Richter? I'm Sarah Jenkins from Adult Protective Services, the woman said, flashing a badge. We received a report concerning your welfare. A wellness check was requested by your family. They claim you are living in squalor, not taking your medication, and exhibiting signs of dementia. My stomach dropped to my toes. They had actually done it. They had called the government on me. They were willing to have me institutionalized to get to my money. I see, I said, unhooking the chain and opening the door wide. Well, Miss Jenkins, as you can see, my house is not squalid. I am dressed. I am lucid. And I invite you to come in and see for yourself. She walked in, her eyes scanning everything. She saw my gleaming floors, the fresh flowers on the table, the smell of the roast I was preparing for dinner. She looked at me, puzzled. The report said you were confused, that you had stopped eating, that the house was filled with garbage. I stopped paying my adult son's rent, I said clearly. That is the only thing I have stopped doing. And apparently to him, that is a sign of madness. I showed her my pantry, stocked and organized. I showed her my medication organizer, which contained only vitamins and a blood pressure pill, perfectly taken. I made her a cup of coffee. We sat and talked for 20 minutes. By the end, she closed her folder with a snap. Mrs. Richter, I apologize for the intrusion, she said, looking angry. Not at me, but on my behalf. It is unfortunately common for disgruntled family members to use our agency as a weapon. I will be closing this case as unfounded. And I will make a note that this was a malicious report. Thank you, I said. Can I get a copy of that report? For my lawyer. Absolutely. When she left, I felt a cold fury I had never known. They wanted to play dirty? Fine. I was done playing nice. I called Mr. Weber. They called APS on me. I know, he said. Mr. Fisher called me. They are filing a petition for guardianship. Renata. They are going to court. They claim you are being manipulated by new friends and are spending your savings recklessly. Let them file, I said. I'm ready. The weeks leading up to the court hearing were a blur of activity, but not the kind I used to know. I wasn't running errands for them. I was gathering evidence. I went to the pharmacy and spoke to Mr. Green, the pharmacist. Mr. Green, I asked him, did anyone ask you about my medications? He looked sheepish. Well, Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came in. She said she was worried that you were forgetting to pick up your heart medicine. She asked me to sign a paper confirming you hadn't picked up any prescriptions in 3 months. I don't have heart medicine, Mr. Green, I said gently. I take vitamins, which I buy at the grocery store. His face went pale. Oh my goodness. She told me. She said it was life or death. I signed it because I thought it would help you get care. It's okay, Mr. Green, but I need you to write a statement explaining that you were misled. He did it right there on the spot. I went to the neighbors. Old Mr. Davis across the street, who was always grumpy, told me Max had asked him if he'd seen me wandering around at night. I told him the only wandering you do is to the trash can and back, Mr. Davis grunted. He tried to get me to say you were yelling at invisible people. I told him to get off my porch. I was building an army of truth. The day of the hearing arrived. I wore my best Navy suit. I did my hair. I looked like the dignified, capable woman I was. When I walked into the courtroom, I saw Max and Lena. They looked tired. Good. They testified first. It was heartbreaking to watch. Max stood there under oath and twisted every act of my love into a symptom of sickness. She's always been generous, he said, avoiding my gaze. But then she just snapped. She cut us off. She changed the locks. She's paranoid. She thinks we're stealing from her. And were you? Mr. Weber asked on cross-examination. Mr. Richter, isn't it true that you had a duplicate key made without her permission? Isn't it true you entered her home to go through her financial documents while she was out? We were looking for proof of her bills, Max stammered. And the wedding? Mr. Weber asked. Did you invite your mother to your wedding? It was small, Max mumbled. Too small for the woman who paid for the dress? Mr. Weber let the question hang there. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Miller, looked over her glasses at Max. Her expression was unreadable, but the air in the room shifted. Then Lena took the stand. She cried. She was good at crying. She talked about how much she loved me, how I was like a second mother. If she is like a mother to you, Mr. Weber asked, why did you tell her you only invited special people to your wedding? I never said that. Lena shrieked, losing her composure for a split second. We have the phone records of the call, Mr. Weber said, calm as a frozen lake. And we have the testimony of Mrs. Richter, whose memory, as we will demonstrate, is flawless. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand. I didn't look at my son. I looked at the judge. Mrs. Richter, the judge asked gently, do you understand why you are here? Yes, Your Honor, I said. I am here because my son and his wife are angry that I have stopped financing their lifestyle. They are here to prove I am incompetent so they can regain access to my money. But I am not incompetent. I am simply finished being used. I spoke for 20 minutes. I told the truth about the rent, the car repairs, the wedding exclusion, the text messages, the breaking and entering. I spoke about the $33,400. I love my son, I said, my voice finally cracking. I loved him enough to give him everything I had, but I realized that by giving him money, I wasn't helping him become a man. I was keeping him a child, and by letting them treat me this way, I was letting myself disappear. I am not disappearing anymore. The judge didn't deliberate long. She looked at the pile of evidence Mr. Weber had submitted, the doctor's report declaring me perfectly sane, the pharmacist's retraction, the APS report clearing me, the bank statements showing their spending. Mr. and Mrs. Richter, the judge said, looking at Max and Lena. This court finds absolutely no evidence of incapacity in Mrs. Richter. In fact, she appears to be the most responsible person in this room. Your petition is denied. Furthermore, I am granting Mrs. Richter's request for a permanent restraining order. You are to stay away from her property and her finances. She banged the gavel. It was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. Max tried to approach me as I was gathering my purse. Mom, please. We didn't mean it. We were just desperate. The landlord. I turned to him. He looked small. He looked like a stranger. You have a wife, Max, I said. And you have 2 healthy hands. Figure it out. Do not call me. I walked out of that courthouse and the air smelled sweeter than it ever had before. Eleanor was waiting for me in the parking lot with a bottle of sparkling cider. We toasted right there by her car. To freedom, she said. To special people, I replied, clinking my plastic cup against hers. And knowing who they really are. That was 6 months ago. My life looks very different now. I sold the big house. It was too much space, too many ghosts. I bought a lovely condo in a community with a gate, and a garden that someone else mows, though I still keep my flower pots on the balcony. I used the money from the house sale to do the things I always said I would do someday. I went to Italy. I ate pasta in Rome and cried in front of the Pietà, not out of sadness, but out of awe at the beauty of the world I had been ignoring. I joined a painting class. I'm not very good, but I love the smell of the turpentine and the way the colors mix. I made friends, real friends. Women like Eleanor who want nothing from me but my company and my recipe for apple strudel. I haven't heard from Max directly. The restraining order ensures that. But I hear things through the grapevine. I hear they had to move into a smaller apartment. I hear Lena had to get a job as a receptionist. I hear Max is working overtime. Sometimes late at night I still feel a phantom ache in my heart. A mother never truly stops loving her child, no matter what they do. I worry about him. I wonder if he's eating well. But then I look at my new life. I look at the calendar on my wall, filled with lunch dates, art classes, and volunteer shifts at the library. I realize that for years I was trying to buy love because I was terrified that without the checkbook I wasn't worth loving. I thought my value was in what I could provide. But I was wrong. My value is in my humor, my resilience, my kindness to those who return it, my ability to survive the unthinkable and come out the other side with a paintbrush in my hand. I learned a hard lesson but a necessary one. You cannot light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they wouldn't even offer you a blanket in the cold. I am Renata. I am 72 years old. I am alone, but I am not lonely. And for the first time in my life I am truly completely free. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Have you ever had to make the hard choice between family obligation and your own peace? Have you ever felt like you were giving everything and getting nothing back? Remember, darling, it's never too late to come home to yourself. You are special. Don't let anyone, not even your own children, tell you otherwise.